I'm talking to Elizabeth Harrin, who is an author, a blogger, and a project manager working in healthcare. Elizabeth has around 15 years' experience managing projects and is one of those people who actively chose project management as a career. Elizabeth, many people will know you as the creator of the influential and user friendly site A Girl's Guide to Project Management. Will you say just a few words about why you established that site and what it does?
So, Girls Guide to Project Management. Well, I started the blog back in 2006, and really there was a bit of a selfish reason for starting it because I was writing a book at the time. My first book was due out later that year, and I had been talking to my publisher and working out what I needed to be doing to support the publication. And one of the things that I'd found out about was that it was quite important for authors to sort of have a bit of a platform, perhaps more so today than it was back then. But I enjoyed writing. Blogging was a good way to start building a bit of credibility and to get my name out there. So it started from that really, and it's gone pretty much from my online diary about what it's like managing projects and what events I attended and what I thought about the conferences I went to and things. And that I was working in France at the time, so I was writing about the differences between that kind of environment and what I was used to back in the UK. And now it's a site with over 1,000 articles, and we've got, I email out to over 14,000 people every week. We do webinars. There's a free template library. It's just grown into something that I couldn't have expected at the time. But I'm glad it's taken that direction because it's grown organically, but it's become much more useful to other people, I think.
Did you have any concerns about the title? Because it struck me as, in some ways, quite retro. It was harking back to the 1940s, the 1950s, kind of Enid Blyton, and I wondered whether you were worried that you wouldn't be taken seriously or that people would not respond well.
That's such an interesting question. And in hindsight, I may well have taken a different direction with the name. But at the time, I was not worried about it because I was the girl. It's my guide to project management. I understand how to use apostrophes. And I thought that it was okay. But it's a very valid point. And time after time, I go to events and men say to me, "Oh, you write about girls. Your site's just for women." And actually, because there's no apostrophe in a URL, obviously, or maybe people just don't see that, or we tend to now abbreviate it to girlsguidetopm.com because the whole name is a bit too long as well. I have been, I wouldn't say the word accused, but when I'm talking to people about it, they do say, "Oh, right, a blog for women." It never really started off with me thinking I was going to blog for women. It was going to be about my experiences as a woman working and running projects. So the reason for that really was because at the time I worked in a department where we had easily more than 50% women managing projects in an IT team. And my practical experience was working with highly competent, well-educated, very professional women. But when I go to conferences or when I went and, looking through the industry magazines back in the day, all the little pictures of bylines were men. All the people on podiums were men. All the people at conferences were in, dark coloured suits. And I didn't think that my experience of being working women in project management was reflected out there. And so that's kind of why I took that angle, because there wasn't really enough stuff on the internet about shoes and chocolate and, the practicalities of what it's like to have to work professionally. And I know some of this might sound trite, but some of the issues that my male colleagues face, like walking across London to a meeting, it's no problem. But you're trying to do it in heels because your office dress code mandates that you wear heels. It's a slightly different experience to try. So it's subtle, and I'm sure men have their own challenges about work, and parents in general have a certain set of challenges about how do you manage your work-life balance. But all I could realistically and genuinely talk about with integrity was what it was like to work as me. So I suppose I saw very few people writing or speaking about project management who looked like me, and in some small way I wanted to address that, put my point of view out there.
Very good. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I don't know whether you'll welcome the comparison, but it's a bit like Woman's Hour. It's a fantastic program for men and women, and I'm really interested in the kind of focus that you have, which is very human, very personal, and offers a perspective on project management that you don't get elsewhere.
What I like to think that I can offer people is the reality of what it's like working. So that there was the last week's newsletter was about 3 ways to get more presence in the workplace. I had loads of people email me back saying, this is what I need to hear. This is nothing to do with certification schemes, but all about how do you get credibility in the workplace? Because as a project manager, you've got no line management authority over your team. You've got very little influence over your sponsor, but you need to be seen as an expert, someone who's highly credible, who's highly professional. And how do you get that? And especially as a young woman working, I mean, I'm 40 now, so young is perhaps, thinking about when I started out at work, it was very difficult to try to achieve that level of credibility in a workplace. Going in to have meetings with directors when I was in my early 20s was a very different experience to now. But I'm sure women today still have the same issue with trying to create a professional persona in work that feels authentic and that gives them the ability to get the work done, which is, I suppose, ultimately what we're all trying to do.
Yes, yes. And when you look back at what you've created, what's happened that was most unexpected?
I think it took me quite a long time to realise that it wasn't about me anymore. And I know that sounds really stupid, but I started out, and I've been through quite recently and looked at some of the old articles from 2006 and 2007, and a lot of it was, there was one about, I went into a bank on the Champs-Élysées, the Barclays branch there. I was trying to organise this. There is an element of personability that you want to get across in your writing, but you don't have to tell people the mundane stories about, this morning I went and I got my smoothie from this, my favourite smoothie bar. You've got to be relatable, but actually it's not about me. What I realised, and it's probably only in the last 12 months, and I'd say this is really keen for people who want to try and get their message across and communicate more effectively, it is all about the audience. What am I offering them? How can I help them do their work better? And yes, a bit of me seeps in because I can't help it. But ultimately, you're not reading my diary. You're coming to my blog, and I'm hoping that I can make your life just that tiny bit easier today by giving you a tool or a technique or an idea that will help you get your team to do what they need to do, and to just, even if sometimes that's just to raise a smile, just to share the fact that other people have the same difficulties. Does that make any sense?
It does, it does. And if you look across the sort of 10 or 11 years since you started the blog, do you think that the project world has made progress in terms of gender in employment and equal pay, or is that just a reflection of the wider organisation?
I think it's probably just a reflection of the wider organisation. I've certainly noticed that equality in terms of magazine article publishing or blogging or going to conferences and seeing women speak or at events, we're getting there. I wouldn't say we have parity, but I would say that it's certainly better than it was when I started writing. But in terms of the workplace, I think Aras people do a very good survey pretty much every year, don't they? And that's shown that there's almost an even split of men and women in project management. I'd have to go back and check it. So I think equality in participation as delivery professionals could be there, perhaps has been there for some time. But I think when you dig into what that actually means, I imagine, and this is my feeling of just what I see, so it's all anecdotal, but perhaps you'll agree, my feeling is that it's men who manage the larger projects and have the more senior roles. So while we might have equal people working in project delivery, I would guess that there are more women managing lower budget projects with lower complexity, and perhaps taking on more project coordinator, administrative type PMO roles instead of a PMO director, head of a big division of project managers leading a big team. I know when we had the Olympics, we had some very high level women on the Olympics delivery team, but I think that was perhaps not really representative of the workplace for most of us.
Yes, I'm sure you're right. Major Projects Association has a gender balance initiative precisely for that reason. At the top level of projects, I think there is a lot of work still to be done. So coming on to the other things that you've done alongside Girls Guide to PM, you've worked for around 10 years at Spire Healthcare, and I know that you've done a number of things. You've tried a number of different knowledge sharing techniques and activities, and I wondered if you'd just share some of those with us and tell us what you did and what went well and what was counterintuitive and what didn't go well.
Okay. Right. We've tried quite a lot of things, both formally and informally. One of the things that we did was a colleague and I ran one-day workshops about project management and time management to raise capability in people who are expected to manage projects, but they don't have the job title of project manager. I think that worked. They went down quite well. And we were able to say, here are the bare minimum templates you need to do. Here are 5 ways to organise your inbox better. We could answer questions face to face with the kind of challenges that people were having, and we helped them work out how to plan their marketing campaigns. And whether people are still using those tools and techniques today, I don't know. But I think on the feedback on the day and afterwards was quite good. So using experienced project managers to deliver, I hesitate to say the basics, but the bare bones of what you need to do to get work done in a structured way to people who are not project managers, that I think worked that quite well. So that's basically knowledge sharing within the organisation, because we're not trainers, but we did our best.
Were you able to tackle issues like, for example, having a presence in the workplace?
No, not there. It was really more around the hard skills of scheduling, identifying stakeholders. We didn't perhaps use that language, but it was more around how do I identify what it is that I need to do? How do I know when I will have stopped? And how do I break down the work I need to do to get from here to there? It was very much more that kind of geared up.
Traditional.
Yes. Well, I started creating a community of people who get involved with projects, and I just had a mailing list. So this was something I did off my own back and was very informal. And I started to share information that I was finding out about. Here's a free webinar on this, because my inbox gets filled up with all this stuff, and let's save other people the trouble of having to subscribe to all the lists. So I was trying to collate things that were happening that were free, or events that were happening in towns where I knew that we had a presence of project professionals, sharing those on email. That was quite well received. I think people appreciated the opportunity to know that there was stuff happening, and within our own organisation as well. If I found out about things, I could pass that on. But it's very passive. It's very difficult to track the value of something like that, because it's basically just a newsletter, and I don't do that any longer. I think there was a moment for it that's probably passed. What else have we done? Webinars. So throughout 2016, I organised a webinar once a month for this informal group of project managers, people who opted in, who were keen to develop their skills, but didn't have to be working as a project manager. So it was open to everybody, really. And we had a series of webinars. We had guest speakers come in, and I think that started out well. We got good attendance, but towards the end of the year, the attendance started to drop. So it might well be that people felt that they would just watch the replay, which is perfectly acceptable, but not so great for a speaker who's given up their time to come along and do a presentation live, and they've got only a handful of people watching live. The replays are all available on the intranet, so people can go back and look at them at their own time. But I think maybe people got busy, or maybe we just ended up taking it for granted. Maybe the topics weren't interesting, I don't know. But I think with any activity, if you're doing it over a sustained period of time, you've got to do something to keep the interest there. Otherwise it just becomes, oh yeah, that's happening again. Oh yeah, that's happening again. And it starts to peter out.
Yes, you have to. I think you have to refresh these things, don't you? Because people just get bored.
Yes.
Anything else you've done?
What I've just talked about is what we do behind closed doors, really. It's things that we do within our own organisation that may or may not work elsewhere. But when you're talking to an open audience, so basically my blog or online communities of any type, because we have a Facebook community and things as well, it's very different, because the level of ability within the people who are part of that community is huge. So, for example, there's some templates available on my blog, and people can go and download them, and some people say they're fantastic, and other people say that's just a spreadsheet, I could have made it myself. The bottom line is many templates are just spreadsheets that you can make yourself. But if you are new to project management and you're looking at a template, you're looking at a blank spreadsheet thinking, I literally have no idea where to start, then you can go online and download one for free, and it saves you maybe half an hour in your day and makes it just a little bit easier to get started and to look professional, because you can then wave it in front of your stakeholders and say, look at me with my professional risk log. It's just something that might help. Whereas the disparity in capability in the audience is quite pronounced. Whereas when you're doing it to a community within your own organisation, you kind of know what level people are, because you either know them personally, or you can tell from job titles and career families where they sit. So that's different, I think. I think there's also a difference in feedback in other senses, because people are very rude on the internet, or they can be. So I think within your professional workplace setting, perhaps because people know of you or know you personally, the level of politeness is more pronounced. So I've probably only had, over the course of all that time, emails that I can count on the fingers of one hand, but some of the language has been abusive. And my feeling is that if you don't like my emails, you can just unsubscribe. There's quite a big button actually at the bottom that you just click. There isn't really any need in a professional or in a personal level to email back somebody a whole load of abuse. And then, I'll unsubscribe them. I don't do drama, don't need that in my life, unsubscribe. But they could have just done that themselves. So the fact that people feel that they can talk to me like that is not something that I would encounter in the workplace.
No, indeed. And I think that they're almost certainly running foul of their professional codes of conduct if they're members of the APM or the PMI.
Yes, I hadn't thought of that. I've never reported anyone, but I might bear that in mind for the future. I think the other difference between knowledge sharing, when it's my own, within my gift, I can choose what content I want to publish. I can take guest posts from the people that I admire. I can get some feedback. Someone writes me an email, can I have a business case template? Okay, I can build one. Whereas within a workplace setting, or within a sort of a formal, more structured setting perhaps, is you have to be a lot more mindful of the politics. I mean that with a small p, just the way that the office culture works. So for example, I don't have project managers reporting to me any longer, so I don't want to be stepping on a line manager's job or HR's job for setting up something. And I don't want it to take up too much of my time to do knowledge sharing within my organisation, because it's a subsidiary part of my role as opposed to my real role of project delivery. So it's just different, and I think I perhaps can't take the same decisions about what I would share in the direction of where I would go, because I need to be more mindful of the wider organisational culture. Whereas online, I'm my own boss. I can say whatever I want, within reason, and always politely.
Fantastic, thank you. I mean, I wanted to make sure that I ask a few questions about your work with Facebook, because you've always been a great experimenter, and I think you've practiced social learning very well, and you talked about some of the skills associated with social learning. Tell us a little about your latest venture, so what you've done with Project Management Cafe, and what you've learned from doing that.
Project Management Cafe. Well, we set this up this year as a Facebook group, because Facebook's now going beyond pages, and engagement in groups is much more significant than engagement on pages. So I've taken my Girls Guide to Project Management page and basically made it a place that I share my blog articles, but it's very much publication. It's very one way. Whereas within the group, within Project Management Cafe Facebook group, it's much more conversational. And even blogging is really quite one way. Aside from a couple of comments I get a week, a couple of emails I get a week, it's still very much me pushing information out there. And the Facebook group is exactly the opposite of that. So the thing we started to do, we've only had this going for, well, since the beginning of the year, not even at the beginning of the year, so maybe since Easter. And we've got over 1,000 people in the group now, because I think Facebook is a really big site for people. People are on it. And I think one of the things we need to do when you're thinking about how do you facilitate a community is to go where the community already is, rather than try to create something else. So tapping into the fact that people are on Facebook seem to work in terms of being able to find people. But then in order to create engagement, what we do is we have theme week once a week, where we spotlight a member of the community and just have a question prompt every day about a particular topic. And what we found about level of engagement is the best way to get engagement is to ask questions with a very low barrier to entry. So for example, we did a theme week on PMOs. And while some of the most interesting questions would have been things like, what are the different criteria that your portfolio team used to prioritise projects, and what projects have you rejected in the last 6 months? That's quite interesting, but actually quite difficult to take the time to answer. So the questions are things like, do you have a PMO? How many people work in your PMO? Do project managers work in your PMO? Things that people can write yes or no, they can click like, they can share. It creates a sense of conversation without it being too much of a burden on people. And I think if you want to write more, by all means, and sometimes people do. You get sometimes people doing very long detailed answers. There's a discussion there at the moment about project management in construction and what software people use. And everybody's got an opinion on this kind of stuff. So it makes it easy for people to weigh in. That's good, because there's this sort of the theory of micro engagement. So if you can get somebody to do something, to make some small effort to engage with the community, like liking a post or commenting yes if you say, have you got a PMO, then they are more bought into that community, and in time they will perhaps grow their involvement. So it's creating a way that people can make that first step in a non-threatening way to be part of something, so that maybe in the future they'll continue to do that and to contribute. So you're not saying to people, come to my Facebook group and post a 600-word post about what you're working on this week with photos of your latest project, because that barrier to entry is just too high. Whereas if we can just create small engagements, then I think as the group grows, we'll have a core of people who've done enough small engagements to feel that they could do something bigger. Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. No, I think you're right. You have the advantage of having a good group to work with because of all the people that you've worked with over the years.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure in terms of generating engagement, that idea of micro engagement, it's a very interesting idea. I might steal your idea for the major projects community.
Well, that's not my theory, so you're welcome to have it.
Thank you.
The other thing we do that gets good engagement in Facebook is video. And I think just on the internet in general, video is more and more prominent. It strikes me as strange because I don't come from a particularly visual way of learning, and I can read very quickly. So I'd much rather read a 600-word post than sit through 3 minutes worth of video. But I know that I might be in the minority, and it's important to create content that people can engage with in different ways. So as well as blog articles, which I don't share in the Facebook group, because we have a real strict policy about what you can and can't share. So we only have one day a week, which is Tuesdays, where people can share their links, because otherwise I think Facebook turns into just a big, here's my latest blog article, here's the latest invite to my webinar, which is not a community, that's just a news feed. So I wanted space for people to do that because it was going to happen anyway, so we constrained it to Tuesdays, but throughout the rest of the week it's just Q&As, and on Friday I do a live video. So I'll either pick up questions that have been asked in the group and give my answer, or there'll be a sort of 5-minute learning point of, we were talking about this. So a couple of weeks ago I did the tools that we've got available for change management. Here are 6 tools that you can use to work on change management within your organisation. So really just quick learning points. And the videos seem to get quite good engagement.
Yes. Were people logging in and watching that live?
It's a bit of both. I do it on 3:30 on a Friday afternoon, which is probably the worst time ever to get anybody live, because in the UK it's school pick-up and drop-off time, and it's just not convenient for the American audience, and it's not convenient for the Australians either. So, but it's convenient for me, so that's why I do it. So no, the people who watch live would probably get less than 10 watching live, which is what, 10% of the community. So maybe that's good. I literally have no idea. But then the views do tend to go up, and I think we've probably got about 164 views of last week's video right now. So again, I mean, it's not reaching thousands of people, but I think with time and with consistency, which is another big thing about creating engagement, is people need to know when you're going to be there and what they're going to expect. And I might change the time in due course to something that might suit people better. That would be a great Facebook poll, wouldn't it? What time do you want it to be?
Yes, you might find that you're torn between 10 or 20 different times.
You can't please everybody.
No, indeed. You might find that you're having to run individual videos every minute of the day. I wanted to finish really just by getting you to do a bit of future casting and looking forward into the future. You've experimented a lot over your career with knowledge sharing. And when you look forward over the next 5 or 10 years' time, what does the future look like in terms of knowledge sharing, collaboration, gender even, and attitudes to knowledge and to skills?
That's really interesting. I think the major shift has already started in terms of where project management is going. And I think we're moving beyond a adherence to standards. And I'm not anti-standard by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think there's more required to run a project than just being able to say that you can complete a Gantt chart and fill in your risk log. So I'm starting to see that reflected in APMQ. Things like registered project professional, the charter status, I have no doubt will include elements of soft skills. The PMBOK guide is moving in that direction with their new chapter on stakeholder management, but there still seems like there's more that we could be doing. And I think it's not just about the skills gap, but it's also business acumen. So there's a knowledge gap around project managers being able to take more end-to-end responsibility and understand how what they do is actually executing strategy, being able to speak about their projects in ways that the executives will understand, using language around business value and outcomes, which traditionally we've only associated with with programs, because there's this view that only programs can deliver outcomes, which I just think is starting to be untrue. But that's probably a whole different podcast, so let's park that. I think in terms of collaboration, we'll see more. We'll just see more people working together. We'll see more interoperability between tools. There's a limit at the moment to how good the technology is, but that's improving. And I think we'll see more artificial intelligence being built into project management tools, which will support decision making. So what would be so fantastic is things like if you could look back over the last 6 months or last 3 years worth of delivery on your major projects and realize that actually somebody always overestimates or somebody always underperforms because of something. And when we build AI into the tools, we can look at big data in a more intelligent way. It could bring those insights to the surface in a way that me as a project manager, I'm not capable of doing. I might be able to think, well, I'm not really sure I believe that estimate because so-and-so always seems to get it wrong. But I can only do that based on my own experience. So if I'm new into an organisation or I'm working with contractors that perhaps I haven't worked with before, there's no organisational knowledge there for me. Whereas if it was embedded in big data sets that we could lift to the surface, we could get better decision making and help with scheduling and things. What else did you ask? Gender? I don't think that's going to change quickly. You know, in your timescales of 5 to 10 years, we're a long way off. So the World Economic Forum, they're talking about 170 years, being 170 years away from gender equality in economic terms. So I think we are probably not going to see huge inroads, although I hope I'm wrong. I really do.
And I share your aspiration that maybe it'll happen faster than that. Thank you so much for your time, Elizabeth. That's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
It's been fun.
And I look forward to hearing what you're up to in the future.
No, thank you for having me.